So, the introduction, Im Sefer, with the book. He said, there are basic questions that come before a person, that a person is asked when he appears before the Beis Din Shel Maalah. And one of them is, Tzipisa Yeshua. Did you look for Yeshua, for salvation, help, redemption? And Rabbeinu Nisim, in his Chedushim, when he brings this, he changes and adds one word, biyamecha, in your days. Now, how do you understand this? Meaning, am I looking in other people's days for Geula to come, for redemption to come? That doesn't make any sense. It's obviously my own days. So, what he means to say is, when you look at what's happening in your time, do you see there the paths leading? Do you see there the events occurring that are leading to redemption? These things were said 650 years ago, right? When seeing any sign of anything other than absolute darkness and getting worse and worse, right, was pretty hard to do, right? The world was not a great place to be a Jew in those days, right? And all the more so in our time, when if you look around, we see miracles that are, yes, they're wrapped in derech hateva, the way of the world. But nonetheless, when you put these things together, they're not normal. You look at, we return to our land. How many people ever have succeeded in returning to their land once they've been exiled, right? We return to our language. We are, by the way, dead languages, there's this idea that once a language dies, it can't be resurrected. We resurrected the language. Right, we got our state back with ingathering of the exiles, right? All of these things, return to Yerushalayim after we didn't have it for 19 years, right? It's almost impossible not to see Yad Hashem in all of these things, if you're looking for it, right? You can choose to say, you can be like the Satmar Rebbe, which we'll discuss later, and say, everything in the history of the world is Yad Hashem, except for the establishment of the state of Israel, which is the Sitra Achra. Right? It's you're putting blinders on. You're not seeing what's happening. And the state of Israel is now, older than
60 years here.
This was written 25 years ago or so, 15 years ago. It's more like 85 years. That's 13 years ago. 9 also says 60 years, and it was a few years before that. So we're getting close to 80. And not in our particular community, but in the state of Israel in general, most of the people in the state were born in the state or made aliyah at a very young age. And for them, the existence of a Hebrew-speaking Jewish state was muvan me'elav. This is just the way it is. It's exactly how I would expect everything to be. I can't imagine something that's different. Even, by the way, even for us, we grew up with a Jewish state, right? We don't know about a time. Our parents do, right? But we don't know about a time when the state didn't exist. So
I go as far back. I remember a little bit pre-67 Israel.
That much. there's a lot to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
I have very, very, I have memories of the '67 war, but they're not crystal clear. They're like images and so on.
I think I may have mentioned them. I remember the Shabbos before, because it started on a Monday. My parents at lunch sing Shiur to Atikva, and I saw tears. And I was like 9 and a half. I go, what's the matter with you guys? And they said, we're not sure there's going to be a state of Israel next Shabbos.
Yeah.
So, sure.
So, it becomes difficult for us to value something that's always been here.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when our education in history and Jewish history is often so bad that we don't realize and feel the things that happened, right? On Hey Iyar Tavshin Ches Tashach, right? The first Independence Day, right? God returned his light, his glance, his grace to us. And he revealed again his desire for his people. It was revealed before everyone, the eternal great love of the creator of the world for Knesset Yisrael, for the congregation of the Jewish people. Ahavat olam ahavtanu Hashem Elokeinu. It is with eternal love you loved us, Hashem Elokeinu. There are times when you read about history when it would be very, very hard for people to feel that, right? We don't have a problem feeling that, right? And, especially with what's going on now with the war in Gaza and so on, so many people have difficulty putting this into a historical perspective compared to pogroms in Tsarist Russia, for instance, which I'm not saying what happened wasn't horrible, but in a historic reference, when you talk about the Chmielnicki pogroms, not even the Holocaust, Chmielnicki pogroms, people talk about 500,000 Jews were killed in 2 years. Right? We're not in the same, it's not the same thing. And this is one of the great elements of a Jewish state, the state of Israel, Yom HaTzmaut, the day of our independence. And therefore we are commanded to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all of our hearts and our souls, and to sing him Shiur Geula, the song of redemption. From the time of the establishment of the state, Rav Drukman, of course, was a Holocaust survivor. He was in ghettos. He was never in a concentration camp, but he saw the world where he grew up certainly didn't exist, right? By the time he left Europe. And he arrived here, I think it was 1944, or 43, 44, something like that. I think 44. Toward the end of the war, but still, it was not an easy thing. So for him to see the difference, right, is much easier than it is for us. We see the establishment of the state, and we also see backsliding, disasters, all sorts of things that are happening, which opens up the question, where is this taking us? Can this really be the process of redemption? Doesn't the redemption supposed to be, like that, instant? Here it is. Open the door, right? You open the door, Leil HaSeder, redemption comes in, and we instantly fly to the base of Mikdash in Yerushalayim, right? Isn't Mashiach supposed to ride on a white donkey into Yerushalayim? Right? Aren't we supposed to be taken up on eagle's wings to our land? Right? How is it that in this process of redemption, and this isn't happening, and how is Klal Yisrael fit for such a thing? You look at Klal Yisrael, we don't seem to be at our spiritual heights right now. The answer to these questions, and many other questions, is the reason why this Sefer, literally tzemach, sprouted, grew. And of course, tzemach, as we'll see later, is the language that Chazal used to refer to redemption. We have to clarify the path of redemption that brings us, that the Ribono Shel Olam brought us in these later generations, right? From a Torah perspective. We have to deal with it and go into it in depth, not a superficial thing. It's superficial to say, right, Eliyahu comes down from heaven in his chariot and says, this is Mashiach, right? But what does the Torah say? What do the Nevi'im say? What do Chazal say? What do the Rishonim and Acharonim say? Right? How do we relate to it? And what has God told us about it? The Rambam was challenged. He didn't have a good relationship with the Rosh Yeshiva of Baghdad. But he was once challenged, why didn't he write more about Mashiach in the Yad Chazaka? And he said, we have to believe it's going to happen. We have some hints as to what it's going to be like. But in fact, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to do whatever he wants to do. Right? Once I was at the Shabbos meal in LA with the Balas Tshuva. And she asked me what Olam Haba was like and what it was and so on. And I ran through a number of the opinions of the Rishonim. And she said, but what's the psak? And I said, we don't paskin such shilas. We try and figure out from what the Nevi'im say and from what the Chazal and the Rishonim say. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to do whatever he wants. It's our job to believe and trust that he's going to do it for the best. Past that, I have no opinion on the matter. Because if I say X, I say it's like the Ramban, for instance, and he says it's like the Kuzari, sorry, you can say whatever you want, but that's not how it works. The original version of the Sefer had two sections in it, and the new version has a third section added to it. The first section deals with the general path of redemption, the final redemption as opposed to previous redemptions. And the second section deals more with things having to do with the state of Israel. And the third new section has to do with the completion of the Geula. We've only seen the beginning. Now, the third section is a more theoretical section, which we can say less on. We can say much more about what we have seen. When Daniel is told to talk about the end of days, he's told to hide the matter. So we have hints. Now, once something happens, it's often extremely easy to say this is what is talked about. So a lot of the things are in hinted form. Some are in absolutely clear form. exactly how that clear point will be played out, there might be more than one possible way. We are told the pasuk says, Achi Shena and Be'ito, that if Klal Yisrael does tshuva, the redemption could happen sooner in time frame. It's still going to have stages to it. It's not going to be instant, as we'll see later on, but it could happen earlier. And if not, Be'ito, there's a time at which HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not allow the redemption to occur past that. There are, as we'll see later, the Navi talks about Karev Yom Asher Hu Lo Yom V'Lo Laila, a day is coming that's neither day nor night. And Rashi explains that it's a period of time that is an intermediate period where we do not have the enslavement of exile, nor do we have the light of redemption. It's very close to the beginning. It's very close to the beginning. And so we know, but exactly how that occurs, once it's happening, you can see, this is what it's talking about. We can have some very clear, we can have a good outline, right? And when things happen, we can say, well, this is clearly what the Navi was talking about. I mean, you certainly can't be mistaken about it when certain things happen. But it is still critically important that we go back to the sources. We go back to the Nevi'im. We go back to Chazal and see exactly where it is and how they express these things. We merit to live in a very great time period, right? We have to look into our time to see what salvation there is there. That's what the Gemara in Shabbos, as Rabbeinu Yonah understood it, Rabbeinu Nisim understood it, right? That what we have to do. And through this sefer, Rav Drukman takes us through those sources so that we can perceive it clearly and know what we're supposed to be looking for in our times. With that, we will start Perek Aleph. Haga'ula kima kima. The redemption comes, I like little by little, but the translation of the book today is step by step. Right? There is a story that occurs in the Yirushalmi, toward the beginning of Brachos, the very beginning of the Yirushalmi. Maybe it's a way of looking at it. The Yirushalmi is much more messianic, I would say, than the Bavli in certain ways. For instance, they had the Kohen Gadol, right? Waiting, right? They still had the ashes of the Paraduma. People were kept tahor, so that they would be able to do the avoda when the Mikdash was reestablished. It seems, to me at least, that the Yerushalmi is much more looking in that way. So the Agada in the Yerushalmi, it's not Agada, it's a Maaseh Shahaya, something that happened between two of the last generation of Tanaim. Rabbi Xiya Rabbah, the great Rabbi Xiya, the one that was Rebbe's Talmud, who was one of the two authors of the Tosefta, Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, Vu Halchim Bahada Karta Bikat Arbel Bekritzta. They were walking together in the valley of Arbel, which is in the north. You can go there. It's on the road to Tzfas. There's a small exit. You can walk in that valley if you want. If you really want, you can do an illegal camping thing there overnight and get up and down Vasikin is apparently where they were walking and seeing it. So they're walking just before light. Varahu Ayel השחר שבקע אורה. And they saw literally the dawn gazelle, meaning the first hint, I would say, of the change of the color of the sky. Meaning, when you're too many Jews nowadays only live in cities and never get out, right? But when you're really out in the middle of no place, the sky is pitch black, right? There's no color to it at all. And then it sort of turns slowly into, let's call it midnight blue, right? So it's that very first beginning of a change of color of the sky. Amar Rabbi Xiya Rabba lirbi Shimon ben Chalafta. But Rabbi Xiya Rabba said to Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, Rabbi, kach hi gaulotan shel Yisrael. Thus is the redemption of Israel. Betchila kima kima. In the beginning, it's little by little, step by step. Kol mashi holechas hi rabba v'holechas. As much as it is, it gets bigger and bigger. Kach betchila. So in the beginning, looking at the redemption in the time of Mordechai and Esther, in the time of Purim, Mordechai Yoshev Bashar Hamelech. Mordechai was sitting in the gate of the king. Va'achar kach, and then bikach Hamanes levush v'yasasus. Haman had to take the garments and the horse of the king and lead Mordechai all over the place. V'achar kach v'yashov Mordechai el Shar Hamelech. Mordechai returned to the gate of the king, right? But he's now got a greater status than he had before. V'achar kach Mordechai yotzei milifnei Hamelech b'levush malchus. Mordechai leaves before the king dressed royal garments, right? The Jews get all their rejoicing. So there's a whole stage. It's not, right? We have the Gantz Megillah. Right? We have to read the whole Megillah to get there. It's not that Hashem says, all right, it's over, everything's great now, right? There's a whole process that we have to go to. Rabbi Xiya taught us that the redemption of Israel is like dawn. And there are a number of ways in which redemption is like dawn. Like the light of dawn appears in the sky in the morning in our world slowly. So too redemption is something that does not appear suddenly. All right? That, so too, when the light appears in the morning, first we have Amud HaShachar, or Los HaShachar, the nates, right? And so all these time periods going on, right? As the light comes, only later do we see that it began. Meaning, at the very beginning of dawn, you don't feel it. It still feels dark. You go to a nate's minyan, it's still dark in the morning, right? And then slowly the windows start getting light. But in fact, it's already started to happen because, we've started davening because it's coming. So too is the process of redemption. The first steps are very difficult to discern, to understand that we've passed through them until we're looking back at them, right? Right? Only once it's passed do we know, oh, that's what that was. Before the first light is the greatest darkness, right? This is in nature, and so it is in redemption. The Chazal mention this in several places. In the Midrash Socher Tov, she'ein lecha afela gedola yoser me'osa shah smucha l'shachar. There is no greater darkness than the hour before dawn. I mean, especially today, right? It's Yom HaShoah, right? And we have immediately before the establishment of the State of Israel, the Holocaust, right? I mean, it doesn't take a genius to see that in this Midrash. V'haya zaracha ka'afar haaretz, and your seed will be like the dust of the earth. K'shiyagiu banecha ad afar haaretz, when your children come to be the dust of the ground, meaning trampled upon, thrust down. Oso shaf ratz yama v'kedma. The Midrash in Shmos Rabbah says at that time you will break out to the west and to the east and so on. There will be a great sprouting of things going on. Again, from the Midrash Socher Tov, Yancha Hashem b'yom tzara. God will answer you in the day of your affliction. Mashal la'av uben, a parable for a father and a son. Shahayu mahalchim b'derech v'nitya gahaben. They're walking in the road and the son gets tired. Amar la'aviv. He says to his father, Heichan hi ha-medina. Where is the city? Medina in modern Hebrew means country, and classically it means city. Amar lo, b'ni, says to me, my son, Siman zeye biyadcha, this is a sign for you. Im re'isa basic kvoras lefanecha, when you see the graveyard before you, harihi ha-medina krova lach. The city is close to it. We're not supposed to have a graveyard inside a city. Nowadays, our cities are so large that we do, but classically they were always outside. Kach amar lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Israel, Im re'isa tzara shetachvu eschem, at the time that you see that the tsaris, there's no good translation for tsaris, it's pain and suffering, but it's not a good translation for tsaris. At that hour, you will be redeemed. Like you really feel. I mean, whenever I read these midrashim, it forces me to think of, right, the Holocaust going into the state of Israel, right? I mean, it's just like it's there. It's not. It's not that sometimes when I hear someone say a pshat, I feel it's forced. This, if you know history of the last 80 years, right? It's there. It's not. You don't have to look at it. It's just there. The Kli Yakar says that just before dawn, the night fights the hardest. Right? This is in nature, right? And this is in spiritual things as well. It's a natural thing. So he says, Me'adua shikachi yamida. It's known that this is the when he says the midah, he doesn't mean a measure, he means the way of the world. Shebachol yom samuch lalot hashachar, hachoshech machshik biyoser, min hashchat halayla. At the time close to dawn, that's when the darkness is the greatest. V'acher kach or hashachar boka'eh va'olah. And after that, the light of dawn breaks forth and goes up. V'ken rov ha'cholim samuch l'misasam hem mischazkim v'yoshvim al hamita. So too, when people are dying, when they get close to death, they strengthen themselves and they sit in bed. Nowadays, we're so good at keeping people alive, it doesn't happen as much, I think.
True. My grandfather was a doctor 50 years in Germany and here.
Yeah.
And he said, that's the rallying, right? They almost get set up like a candle before it goes out, the flame sort of goes up.
Yeah, but now often we keep people alive, and that's what I'm saying. I mean,
before all the artificial prolongation, life support.
I am not in favor of all of those things.
I'm with you. I can say that from a medical point of view too.
There was a guy who was an incredible guy. Whatever, long life story, but he died in his 90s. And at 2:00 in the morning, he woke up his wife. The family knew he was dying. He woke up his wife. He said, "This is it." She woke up the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. They all came into his bedroom. He said Kriya Shema with them, and he died. At the Levaya, someone said, where do you sign up? I said, you live your whole life a certain way, and this is what happened. But he refused in the end. He refused to go to the hospital. They said, 100%. And also, it's horrible for the family. Because, instead of death being a major tragedy, it's so often a relief because the person's been in the hospital unconscious for 6 months. Anyway, Vakshim le'achol, they want to eat. And after that, the death gets strong and kills them. V'ken b'yamos hachoref, and so too in the winter. Samuch lias hashemesh, hakor holech v'gover. At night, just before dawn, is when it's the coldest, right? In the end, the cold is defeated by the sun. V'zehu davar TV. This is a natural thing. Ki kol davar TV, hamargish sheba kenegdo eze davar hafchilo. When it feels that its opposite is coming, harotze levatel mitziusa, that wants to nullify it, as hu mitchazek biyoser keneged misnagdo. Then it strengthens itself before its opposition. V'yama'ein la'anos panav upol betivo kol asher yamatzei b'kolcho lifol. It uses everything that's in its power to do. U'lebesof hu menutzach, and in the end it will be, the other force will defeat it. Ki gavar alav hefech, because the other one will be stronger. Kachu b'chol advarim she'hizkarnu. So too is in everything that we mentioned. Redemption is this way. It's the worst bad before it starts getting good, right? And as we've seen, it's not instant. It's a process, right? When something or someone sees its end, right? It strengthens itself. That's the point where it tries to become the strongest. To put it in Hasidic terminology, when the kochos atuma are strongest just before they're thrown into the mikveh, right? So too we have in the world, in the process of redemption, we have the most resistance before. And I think, to a certain extent, we sometimes have greater problems, before we come to a greater solution. And it's always something that we have to think about and work on. Ad kan for tonight.